Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Margarita, and today I'm here to bring you an embarrassingly overdue book wrap-up. I'm going to combine November and December in the interest of saving time so that I can get these books back on my bookshelves. I'd like to really apologize to anybody who might have been waiting for a video from me. I know I disappeared for about 2 months, and I'm really sorry about that. I just got swamped with work and all this stuff with the holidays, and I'm so sorry, but I'm really hoping that with the new year I'll be able to get back into it in full swing. I have a couple videos that I'm really excited to film. I just haven't gotten around to them yet. I'm going to start with my wrap-up first. So these books are in order from my least favorite to my most favorite books that I read for each of the months, and let's just get into it so this video is not forever. So the first book that I read, or the first book in my wrap-up for November, is The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. I was incredibly disappointed by this book. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It did not live up to what I was hoping it would be. First, let me tell you a little bit about the book, and then I will tell you my thoughts about it. So this is a book that takes place in Amsterdam in the 1600s, and it follows a young woman who gets married to a merchant and is sent off to live with him. I think they've met once before, and then they got married, and off she goes. And there is a lot of mystery surrounding her husband and the family aspects and all the things that go on in the house, because when she gets there, she doesn't feel like she's the lady of the house. She feels like she's just some person that's started to live with them. And so in an attempt to, I don't know, build a bond with her or something, her husband buys her a miniature of their house as a wedding gift. So for something for her to do, she starts ordering pieces for her miniature house. And the pieces that she gets are eerily reflective of her actual life and what is going on in the house. And she tries to meet with the miniaturist to understand why she's doing this. If she's mocking her, if she's stalking her, she doesn't know what's happening. So there's this atmosphere of mystery. You don't know what's going on in the house itself because of her husband and the sister and all this stuff, but also you don't know who this miniaturist is and why she's sending these things to this young girl. And drama unfolds and whatnot. I was really hoping to love this book. I heard nothing but wonderful things about it, and I went in with high hopes, and maybe that was my fault, but it just really fell flat, and I felt that the answers you were given for some of the things, some of them were obvious, and others I just wasn't satisfied with the answer. You don't actually learn enough of the answer to make it, it's like, okay, so that didn't answer anything. Especially when it comes to the miniaturist, I felt that the questions were not answered enough, and that just really bothered me. It was okay. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's an okay read. It's not what I was expecting, and I was really disappointed. That's why I could not give it more than 3 stars. It's not a bad book. I was just incredibly disappointed. The next thing that I read is Memories by Lang Leave. This is a poetry collection. It contains some of her poems from Love and Misadventures. It also contains some of her poems from Lullabies, and then also new works that haven't been in either of those books. I really enjoyed this. I could connect to some of them a whole lot, and I felt, you know, when poetry just speaks to you, that's what this collection did for me. And I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. There's really not a whole lot more to say. So I've been rereading some of my fairy tale books, retelling books, and this month, in November, sorry, can't talk, words are hard today. In November, I read Snow by Tracy Lynn. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It is a retelling of Snow White, and there are magical elements to it, but it also it has a lot of blending of science in it, which I really love as a science nerd myself. Again, there is still magic in it because the science would never actually work in the story, or in real life, but in the story with magic combined, it's really good. And I think it's a very interesting retelling. It's not one that I've seen anywhere else, so I really enjoyed this. Next, I read Traffic by Ellen Hopkins. This is her sequel to the Tricks book. I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry, words, the book Tricks, which is about teenage prostitution. It follows 5 characters and how they actually get into prostitution. And then Traffic is the book that follows the same 5 characters, but after what happens in Tricks. I'm not going to tell you what. But it's a story of how they deal with trying to get back into the normal world after being teenage prostitutes for some of them, the dangers that they face, the stigmas that they face, all that kind of stuff. I really, really enjoyed this book. I enjoy almost all of Ellen Hopkins' books. I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend any of her books if you enjoy that kind of stuff. But again, trigger warnings galore. I mean, there's rape, there's drugs, any of her books will have a trigger warning, so just know that going into any of her novels, if you have problems with stuff like that, don't read them. The next book, or the last book that I read in November, is actually the first book that I finished in November, and that is The Black Prism by Brent Weeks. I don't know what it is about Brent Weeks' writing, but whenever I read his books, I start off just reading them for the sake of reading something. It just happens to be the book that I picked up. And I'm never like, oh wow, super invested in the story until like 100 pages in. The next thing I know, my mind is all over the walls and the ceiling. It's just blown, and I just don't know how he hooks me. And then I can't put it down. I don't know I've never encountered a writing style like that before. Usually, for me, I'm hooked or I'm not interested, and that's going to be how it is for the rest of the story. And I can tell pretty fast. There's something about him, though. So this, I'm sure everybody knows about it, but this is an epic fantasy, and the magic system in this world is the spectrums of light. And the more spectrums of light that you can control, the more powerful you are. But it's a double-edged sword, because the more light that you use and the more magic that you use, the faster you go mad and die. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, and this follows Guile, who is the prism in this world, which means he can control all the spectrums of light. And there's only one prism born every generation. And then after he dies, a new prism will be born. But it follows the aftermath of this war that was, I think, like 20 years ago, where there was a false prism, where there were 2 people claiming to be the prism. And this is just read it. I know, I'm sorry, that probably made no sense, but the world and the atmosphere, the magic, the political system, everything about this book is so good, and I cannot wait to buy the second book and continue reading. I'm going to hold off for a little bit, though, because I need to read some of the books that are already on my bookshelf that haven't been read yet, but definitely pick this up if you haven't and you like epic fantasy. Pick it up. You will not be disappointed. It is wonderful. So those are all the books that I read in November. I'm going to jump into the books that I read in December. First thing that I'm going to mention, I never actually finished, but I did read quite a bit of it. I read about 232 pages of it in December, and that is The Final Empire, Mistborn Book 1 by Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if it's because I was kind of in a reading slump at the time or what it is about. I'm not super hooked on this book. I don't really care about the characters. I don't really care about the magic system. I don't know what it is, but I put this book down mid-December and haven't picked it back up yet. And I'm not really itching to pick it up. I don't know if it's just a bad time for me to be reading this book at the moment, but I'm not really... But since I read so much of that book, I figured I'd mention that I read it in December. The next book that I read is Beastkeeper by Kat Hellison? I don't know. And this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It was okay. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't anything spectacular. It was something to pass the time. I probably won't be reading this again. I will probably be unhauling it here shortly to make room for all the books that I have. But yeah, I'm not such a big fan of that one. 3 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I read, again, I said I was rereading my fairy tale retellings, and I read Scarlet Moon by Debbie Vigui. I can't pronounce your last name. I'm sorry. Here, you can decide for yourself. And this is... I don't know. I guess this is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. And it's good. It's short. I read it in about a day. It was just something to read. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It's not the best retelling I've ever read, but it's not the worst. I will definitely be keeping this. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. So next I read Zombie Repossession, and this is by Chris Robertson and Michael Aldred. And this is, I believe, the final book in the iZombie graphic novel series. And I enjoyed it. It was okay. It was nothing. I felt like the ending was a little too convenient, but it was okay. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion about it, but I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, so it was entertaining enough. Is that bad? I should probably start rating books a lot more critically. Sorry. So we're just going to draw a veil over that. The next book that I read is Snow White, and this is the Brothers Grimm, but it is illustrated by Camille Rose Garcia. Oh my god, this book is so beautiful. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of the rating went towards the pictures in this book. I mean, they're just gorgeous. I've never actually read the original Snow White story, so that was a very interesting experience for me. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, by the way. I have to admit, towards the end, I was starting to want to smack Snow White in the face, because it's like, how many times do you have to tell this girl, don't do something, and she does it anyway? It's like, good God, girl, get it together. But it was still a really good story. I really enjoyed it. And can we just talk about how beautiful this book is, just the naked hardback, for a second? Look at that. Look at that. It's just so beautiful. The drawings are amazing, and the color palette. I mean, I love everything about this. And I will definitely be keeping this and reading it and rereading it. And I just loved it. And then the last book that I read, I gave 5 out of 5 stars to. It's probably the best book that I've read in a while, and that is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This, I'm sure everybody's heard about it. I'm probably the last person to read it, but this is a historical fiction, and it talks about 2 sisters in World War II in German-occupied France, and what they do to resist Nazi Germany in this time. It is so beautifully done. This book is just absolutely amazing. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend that you do. It's so wonderful. It follows these 2 sisters. One is a mother, and her husband is, I think he's a postman, a mailman, and he gets drafted into the war. And so she's absolutely devastated by this. And her sister is sent to live with her because she lives in the country of France, and her sister hates the Germans. She absolutely hates everything about them, which is understandable. But her sister decides to join the resistance, and her sister, God, what's her name? Isabel, decides to join the resistance, and Vianne is the one that's married. She's the older sister, and Vianne she worries about her sister, but she has her own family to think about. And it's so beautifully done. I mean, there are moments when Vianne has a German officer living in her house, but there are moments where you see that the German officer, he's not a bad person. He's a person. He wants to go home just as much as Vianne wants him to leave. And he cares about her. And there were moments that you want to hate him because, I mean, he's a Nazi, but you can see that he's a person. And it's just, it makes you uncomfortable to realize that these people, they're not always bad. They're just following orders, because if they don't follow orders, then their life is hell and their family's life is hell. And it's so beautifully done. That's one of the things that stood out the most to me, is how real they made it, and how in the very beginning they say that they surrendered to Germany, and then slowly things start changing, and they keep thinking, oh, it'll never happen, it'll never happen, and then the next chapter it's happened, and it's just so good. And I feel like it's such a realistic representation of what happened. Granted, I wouldn't know, but it seems so real, and it's so beautiful. I think that the ending, there were some moments that probably would not have happened that way in real life, but they were put there to try and make you feel a lot more feelings than you would have if it hadn't happened that way. If you've read the story, you probably know what I'm talking about. But again, this was just absolutely wonderful, and I definitely recommend that you read it. So that's it. Those are all the books that I read at the end of the year, and I will be coming to you guys probably in the next video with a book haul so that I can put those books on my bookshelves and get all these stacks of books put away. So I will see you guys next time. Bye!